Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Big League Breakdowns for day 8 of Around the League in 30 days. And we are at the Cincinnati Reds with a new look manager in 2025, looking to potentially take the next step toward the postseason. My name is Tyler, my co host tonight, John, and Will, as always, Bobby as well, behind the keys. And gentlemen, let's get right into this. A team that missed the playoffs last year, a couple games under 500, but potentially, we'll see. I think more people than other think they'll probably be where they're at, but some people think they might take a step. So let's look at that lineup, that projected opening day lineup for the Reds. Starting off at the top, of course, Elly De La Cruz in that 2 spot. What can he do this season? Does he take the next step? Matt McLean, Tyler Stevenson, a couple of young guys who can definitely make a difference. Spencer Steer at first base, and then the new additions, Gavin Lux and Austin Hayes, are at the bottom of that list right there. Also, should mention, by the way, these projections from Fangraphs, so things could change. Obviously, spring training now a thing as we are recording this on February 24th. Spring training injuries are going to come into play. Jose Trevino on the bench as well. Christian Encarnacion Strand. They got a lot of depth in this lineup. And then looking at the starting rotation, some additions here from last year. Hunter Green, of course, the young ace that they have that they hope, again, takes the next step. Brady Singer comes in after a stint in KC. Andrew Abbott, Nick Martinez, and Nick Lodolo. Of course, Graham Ashcraft as well. They're in that long relief spot who might get a chance at the starting rotation because as of recording, just seeing that Andrew Abbott is dealing with a little issue in his rehab, so he might not be ready for opening day. They add Taylor Rogers and Scott Barlow to strengthen up that pen. Of course, Alexi Diaz still in that closing spot, and he can be when he's on, he can be really, really good. But that is your projections for the Cincinnati Reds in 2025. And now getting into the storylines, I think out of all the things that they did this offseason, the players that they brought in, the players that they let go, the biggest addition or transaction you can say in general was bringing in Terry Francona. I think that is the main point in this, and really, I think why I am more hopeful about them. Terry Francona seems to be a magic worker sometimes. So, Will, I know we've kind of talked about this a little bit just because of my claim, that they won the offseason and you guys ripped me for it. Because I couldn't choose the Mets, by the way. Just want to throw that out there. But
Oh,
Oh, you
that
couldn't
was
choose
the
the
reason.
that
Dodgers.
was the reason I was gonna
Yeah,
join.
that's the
I
reason
was
for
gonna
your
say the
horrible
Mets.
take. Okay.
Nothing said you couldn't piggyback off of John. We just cut the Dodgers out of the question because
Right.
Yeah.
they are in a whole other category.
Well, I said, all right, let
And,
me.
and nothing said that you had to pick the Reds either. Like you could have picked any of the other 28 teams.
No, I look. A big part of it is really because of Terry. So I mean, Will, this is a manager who's had success and again, it's really good with those young ball clubs.
It is kind of surprising to me when looking more in depth at the Reds roster compared to the then Indians, now Guardians, with when Francona joined them, how similar their rosters were kind of built, or at least how those teams were coming off of poor seasons the previous year, and then at least for the Guardians, their first year with Francona, they won 92 games. So from just face value, looking at all the transactions that the Reds did in the offseason, nothing stands out, and it feels like they didn't do much. But as you said, the Francona factor, I think, is going to be huge. And I still don't think the Reds had a good offseason, but I feel like Francona can do a lot with very little. And so I'm starting to maybe soften up a bit about what I think the Reds will do, even though I don't think they're really going to be close to a wild card.
Yeah, John, and I'll ask you this straight off the bat because again, maybe I'm overvaluing what Francona can bring to a team. But this is a team that was not. I mean, they were a couple games under 500 last year. Like they weren't even that terribly off the division. And again, you have to remember what division this is. So, is he going to make a big enough difference for them to potentially compete for the division this year?
Well, I'm going to give you guys some stats really quick. Just looking at things at face value. In 1996, when, th- I should say, in 1997, when Terry Francona first took over for the Phillies,
Oh boy.
he immediately made an impact in terms of helping the Phillies uh, increase their wins by one. You could say that isn't much of an improvement, but hey, improvements are improvements. What I'm looking at right now is him as a more experienced manager, and that's 2003 with the Red Sox. And in my opinion, you could argue that that really helped them get over the hump and defeat the curse of the Bambino in 2004, helping them win the World Series. And then in 2012, this is the big one. Cleveland had 68 wins. 2013, after he takes over, they have 92 wins. So I think if you look at that and look at that at face value, look at his history, you have a winning manager here, a guy who knows how to win, a guy who can really turn franchises around. Will the Reds be in the playoffs because of him? I'm not sure. But definitely this is somebody you want at the helm, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I just look at the six like you just brought up, right? Like his first year with Cleveland, they go 92 and 70 after going 68 and 94, and that's much worse than what the Reds went last year. So if you think, and the other thing too is people thought last year that they took a step back with David Bell as the manager. They, the year before they kind of started to make some moves, and you thought, okay, they'll take the next step this year because that's natural progression, and it didn't happen. So I think they're really not that far off of being like a low 80s win team, maybe close to mid 80s. Like, I guess the question is, and Will, I'll propose this to you: how many wins, if you could put a war on managers, how many wins does hiring Terry Francona give you?
I
Because
don't know how to calculate
no,
WAR for
no,
a manager. God, I barely understand it for a position player.
that's true. But
I
like,
can answer it based off my opinion if you want.
well, no, it was a rhetorical question. Of course, we don't know manager war, but
I don't
Bakota,
even know how to play along.
Bakota, we love this. They have him at 74 wins, which is three less than last year. And you look at Francona's track record; he improves every team he's on. So you would expect it's going to go up from 77. So
But here's the thing is that I think that 74 wins, I think that's them saying, hey, with Terry Francona at the helm here, they're going to be the exact same. And the reason I say that is because of his experience and his ability to lead a clubhouse. Whereas arguably, I think you could say that the Reds honestly got worse.
I would
Projections
say
do
that,
not calculate a manager's impact at all. That's one of the things
yeah.
against any of these things. They're just going to base it purely on the stats of the players. And actually, there are some players which I feel like are heavily like projected against, Brady Singer being one of them. Probably go back into that maybe later when we talk more about depth. But you can't factor in the impact that a manager has on a team. So that's why the projections are, stupid.
Yeah, I would agree with you, John, that I wouldn't say that they got better, but I also wouldn't say they got worse. We'll talk about again the depth that they kind of have and the pieces that they're gonna have to figure out where they're gonna go. But they lose Jonathan India, who was there for a while, but really like he was good. He was okay, but he was never great. And they get Singer out of it, which I think could be a really good addition for them, especially with the staff that struggled mightily in the starting pitching last year. So again, I don't think they necessarily got worse. Which then again, my point would be Francona usually improves these kind of teams, and again, it's such a young team that I think that he'll really propel this team to be great, to take the next step. Um, you guys made fun of me, and I keep bringing it up about, oh, they're a year away from being whatever I said, but
They're a
like,
year away from being a year away.
right, but like, I don't know, man. I'm starting to feel more confident about this team. Like,
It's purely Francona.
yeah, it is, it
It's
is.
literally
It's
because
purely that. And the
that
question is, if Francona going to be like Francona was when he went to the Guardians, or is he
yeah.
going to be like what Girardi was when Girardi went to the Phillies, and which was absolutely nothing despite
Yeah.
the experience.
Let's
I don't think that it'll be like that. I mean, in Girardi's
I know
defense,
they're completely two different types of managers that
yeah,
have two
he
different ways
seems
that they handle guys, and they are literally polar opposites on how they treat young guys, especially.
yeah. I mean, Francona seems more like a young fun manager, whereas Girardi seems much more of a hard nosed manager for like young guys. So I think those managerial, or I feel like that is in Francona's favor.
Yeah, the style of it. Yeah, I would agree. And again, he has a track record of doing this. Let's talk about the depth that the Reds have this in this season with their offseason additions. They bring in Gavin Lux at second base. We'll see if he ends up sticking there. Of course, all the guys that they already have. But I guess my question is, they have more infielders than they have spots, and I think they have guys that are they on the cusp of maybe, taking the next step up. It's going to be very interesting. Of course, you have Gavin Lux coming in, you have Matt McLean, you have Elly, you have Spencer Steer, you have Candelario. So that alone is what, five or six guys, and there's not enough spots. So I think you look at their outfield depth and you kind of have questions there. So maybe like does Matt McLean go out to the outfield? I'm not sure. But will they have
I don't think
options?
I don't think you put him out there.
I just feel like so I was actually kind of curious because I thought, Matt McLean, they trade India. All right, Matt McLean's going to he's the guy now at second base, and then they brought in Buck, so it was like kind of weird. But Matt McLean like seems like he's kind of ready to take the next step. So he's got to be in the lineup. So regardless, again, well, you have a lot of guys that could be impact players. I guess it's a good problem to have, but how do you see this like panning out for them?
Francona's got all the options he can to mix and match depending on matchups, who's slumping, who's not. And it's really, I feel like, if anything, just a matter of giving him as many pieces as they possibly can for him to work the magic that he does. But if there's one thing I feel like they should do, and I don't think they're going to do, is if you're smart, you're going to put Elly De La Cruz in the DH spot because he's like the worst defensive shortstop in all of baseball, and it's not even close. You can say
Yeah.
what you want about how hard he throws because that's probably the main reason he's still in the lineup. But like this man, I'm trying to pull up his fielding errors from last year, and it's not working fast enough. He led the National League with 29 errors.
Yeah.
So lovely.
Well, it's interesting you bring it up with the DH because I was thinking, all right, and this would be funny because O'Neal Cruz with the Pirates, like they moved him to the outfield, and I think they were actually asked about that if they would move Elly, and they're like, no, he's not moving to the outfield. So maybe the DH spot. I think he would be better, obviously, at a DH, or like maybe put him back at third base, which he's played a little bit. But I don't think shortstop is the place for him. So we'll see if they end up making a move there. By the way, another
I
name.
think
Yeah,
ultimately what you were saying about McLean though is while right now McLean is slated as the second baseman or shortstop. No, second base. Lux is the DH right now.
yeah,
What I think ultimately will happen is McLean is going to be the like super utility guy, and the reason why he gets another super is that he's going to be your guy that he's not going to play every day, but he's still going to get like 130, 140 games played and over 500 at bats because he's going to be the first guy they turn to on the bench, and he's just going to play a little bit of everywhere. You were saying maybe they might stick him in the outfield, and I think there's a chance at least on a corner spot. But the fact that he can play pretty much anywhere in the infield and he was as good as he was last year, that I think that's probably going to be the first thing they do. And he's the ultimate tool for mixing and matching for weapons.
yeah. I mean, the other player that I didn't mention this is Christian Encarnacion Strand, who like they were pretty high on him too. And another guy, he missed a lot of the season because of PEDs and didn't have a great year last year. But Novelli Marte as well. Like they have such a surplus of these infielders that maybe a guy like McLean, because as you said, he's kind of the utility guy type, that they would put him in the outfield because I don't love their outfield depth nearly as much as I like their infield depth. That is for sure. So. Again, John, this is a good problem to have. You kind of had the same situation with the Orioles where you have a logjam of talent. Now, I think in the Orioles case, it was kind of more clear cut. Like these, it's good that they have depth, but they don't have guys that really stand out outside of Ellie. So is this a positive for them? Is it like something that they can work with, or is it something that will like hold them back because they don't have those like stars?
Well, let's put it this way. This is all hypothetical, I would think, because in reality, Ellie's going to be the shortstop until he says otherwise. Let's be honest here. Uh, but hypothetically, say you put Matt McLean at shortstop. I mean, his WAR is 3.7. So that's a guy you really don't want to take off the field. I mean, whether that's at second base, whether that's at shortstop, you know, really that's you have to keep him on the field. Now whereas you go to Gavin Lux, he has a lower WAR, what you call it, last year of 2.1. So you gotta you can make the argument on recency that Matt McLean gives you the best chance with a higher batting average, and just overall a higher on base percentage to have success. So if you're gonna make sure somebody stays on the field, it is Matt McLean. Now, when you look at things of this depth that they have, yeah, it's a good problem to have. I mean, it's kind of the exact opposite of what the Orioles have, whereas the Orioles have outfield depth, and seems like the Reds have tons of infield depth. But you know, you gotta pick and choose. You can't. Only 9 guys can play the field, and one of them's the pitcher. So you can't just go into this and be like, all right, everybody's gonna get a turn, and you only get so many roster spots.
Yeah, I mean
McLean also did not play last year, so
yeah.
there could be trying to ease him back in. Where he had a good showing in 2023, but after not playing at all, that you don't want 100% jump in just in case he's not quite as good as he was his rookie year.
Yeah, I mean McLean was always a guy that they were pretty high on. And I think like we kind of already touched on, they like his utility. But as John was saying, I think that's a guy like you have to have in the lineup. So if that means putting him in the outfield for because of a spot, I think that's what you have to do because Ellie's going to be in the infield, right? I think there's a pressure to at least Gavin Lux is at least going to play second base or short or DH. Like he's going to be in the lineup because they traded for him. He is a former first round pick. I think there might be like the pressure at least to start to be like, all right, let's try to get this guy in the lineup. We know he has capability. Spencer Steer, it seems pretty locked in at first. He had a 20 home run season last year. So it leaves like one spot. And it's like, all right, you have a bunch of
My whole thing
guys
is
that
like
can.
you can't have. I don't think Lux is your DH answer. I think your DH answer is honestly the best answer is probably what Will said
Yeah, oh, I
of having
agree.
Oh, we
Ellie.
know what the best answer is, but like you said, they're not going to do it. So it's a
Yeah.
matter of, all right,
Correct,
then what's your
correct.
second best option?
And
Well, I
I
don't even think he's the second best option. I almost wonder if
But your
McLean's the second best
third,
option.
no, if they if they did it, I agree. I think Ellie would be like that's where he should be. But John, as you said, I think until Ellie says, "Hey, I want to be DH," he's going to be the shortstop. I mean, the shortstop
I mean,
is that.
I'm just looking at Lux's home run totals. He's only hit 28 for his career.
Yeah, I mean he's
yeah, but it can be more than just a power hitter.
yeah, and I think
All right, I
he's
understand that, but
also had his
batting
problems in
average
the
is
field.
still not great. It's kind of mid
Well,
to
look,
average, and his on base percentage is
He needs to do what he did
less
basically in
than
2022,
stellar.
yeah,
where he
look.
hit 276, led the league in 7 triples, only 6 home runs. But, the 270 average, nearly 350 on base, that's what you need.
I mean, Cincinnati took a flyer on him, right? Like they know again, he was a top prospect at one point. You can see that he has the potential. So it really didn't work out as well as the Dodgers would want. Of course, they have really high standards. But maybe the
By
Reds can.
standards, it's simply the fact we can buy somebody else.
Yeah, exactly, right. And
Listen, I'm not
and
gonna
that's
keep
why.
playing with my broke ass toy when I
Yeah.
can go out to the store and buy a new ass toy. I'm not gonna do it.
Well, that's exactly what happened to him because I think they were trying for a while, and they got to the point where it's like, all right, whatever, like ship him out of town. So again, they have options there on the pitching side. Like I said, I really like the addition of Singer, but you still have a lot of questions about young guys. At the the bottom of the rotation again, Andrew Abbott, we don't know what the extent of that injury is. Nick Martinez, they were able to re-sign, so that's good, but. Well, I think that's still probably the biggest. I think a lot of the problems they had last year are going to come back again, right? You're going to worry about the pitching and you're going to worry about the inconsistency on offense.
And the health of the pitching. But Zips projects that the Reds are going to have a 4.42 team ERA in 2025. That is a huge step back from what they were in 24. So I guess that's why it has, or Pacoda may have the projections around 75 wins. But I'm gonna keep saying the same thing until someone tells me to shut up, and that's that it's all about the Terry Francona factor. I think the top two in the rotation is a very nice 1-2 punch in Green and Singer, and Green took a nice step forward last year, getting an all-star appearance and finishing with an ERA in the mid threes. I think it's really going to be a matter of those two will probably give you good numbers somewhere within the 3 range. And then it's how the guys after that will, one, stay healthy, and two, who steps up, who gets thrown in the bullpen. And I think Francona is going to be a nice leader to both get that little extra out of the guys that have shown some signs of it. I've always kind of liked Lodolo, and that's only because he doesn't have great numbers, and then he faces the Phillies, and he's a Cy Young pitcher. So I'm like, where the heck is this for everyone else?
It's like Ryan Mountcastle with the Blue Jays. It's just that one team.
There's
Man.
it happens with some
it's
pitchers.
that weird thing about baseball. I run into this team, I am ass. I run into this team, I am a god.
Yeah.
Confidence in the scouting report. But no, I can see how Francona will I'm curious if Francona will be the type of manager where these guys also may only pitch 5 or 6 innings, and it becomes a lot of matchup situations in the bullpen. I know bullpen was an issue, but looking at the Guardians, they've always seemed to be amazing when it comes to their pitching in the bullpen, regardless of who you throw in there. So I can't help but thinking that it's going to be something like that. I like the addition of Rogers via trade acquisition because he can be a closing substitute if Diaz goes in one of his funks where he's just like the world's worst closer and completely in the shadow of his brother. But it's really, yeah, it's hard to predict where you think this is going to go because both sides have valid arguments.
Well, I think, and John, I want to throw this back to you with kind of the same reference that Will made, but it's like, can Francona get the best out of those 3 through 5 guys? Because he's just been able to do it throughout his career, it seems like.
Can he? Yes. Can they or do they have enough talent to give him their best? I mean, if there's a guy who knows how to cover up the warts of his 3 through 5 guys, it's definitely Terry Francona. And I think a way you typically do that is by relying on your bullpen for a game. The Reds' bullpen is interesting, to say the least, if you're a hitter. Anyway, the reality of the situation is that this might be a hill that is too steep to climb for this year. So in reality, I think that his best option, I think their best option would honestly be to try and make some trades here. But I mean, what's the old adage we always say? Bullpens range from year to year. So that's just let's hope and pray that the team we're going in with isn't horrible.
Well, the other thing too to look at as well is that they have a guy in Rhett Lauder who was their seventh overall pick in 2023, and he is kind of injured right now as well, and he should be ready for opening day. But how does he maybe factor in too? So they have again a lot of options, and I think that's what I like about the Reds with with Francona. Like, give Francona options, let him work his magic. It's going to work out.
But
That's
does he have
why
the
I'm
right
high on him.
options? That's the problem.
I think that these guys have shown enough potential that yes, I think I'm like really talking myself into the Reds, man. I know you guys aren't on them like this, but I'm really talking myself into the Reds,
I'm
dude.
right.
Is
Wait till
this
you see
is
my
this your
predictions. You
Tigers of
might think
Well,
different.
2025?
yeah, it might. Well,
Yes,
I
yes,
can't.
this is
Well,
100%
actually,
his right.
hold on. I can't support the Reds. I actually kind of hate the Reds. I think
I was
they're
You
about
like
to
the
can't
say.
Pirates.
support them, but they still are your Tigers. You're just not on their side.
Yeah, you're
Like
just not going out and buying your Elly De La Cruz jersey. You're, you
for
know,
I don't know. As a Pirates fan, like it's hard to really say we've had rivals because we've been so bad. But the Red series always seem to be like amped up, so I guess I would say I hate them. But I don't know. Like I just look at that 77 wins and I'm like Frank Cona's gonna do better than that. And I guess the wild card again is gonna be, do the Brewers come out and are they as good as we think they are? But I'm telling you, man, the NL Central is up for grabs for anybody. So I don't
if
know.
if the Brewers come out and they're able to do what they did last year and just shock everyone, and be like, "Yeah, you think we're gonna be bad? Screw you, we're not gonna be bad."
I mean I'm not betting against the Brewers anymore because it's never worked.
Well, I'm just
But
saying that would be impressive. At that
yeah,
point, that's a trend.
yeah.
That's not a one off. But I want to look at Graham. I want to look at Ashcraft real quick with this, especially with the Louder injury that could thrust him into a starting role. That puts you at a
Oh, dude,
deficit
covered.
because this guy, his career ERA is just below 5. His ERA last year is was well over 5. They would be in trouble if he has to make a start.
Yeah. And well, I don't know if you want to bring up your stat that he had, but his earned run would be a lot higher if they were earned runs that he gave
Well,
up.
I'm talking about in the minors was my
Oh
thing
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
so our conversation going into this episode behind the scenes was in looking at the Reds rotation was Ashcraft viewed as a well touted prospect when he was coming up. He's obviously had stints in the majors now for partial of 3 years. Um, and so doing some digging there, he had an interesting 2022 line where his ERA between AAA and AA, though really it was 8 of 9 starts in AAA, his ERA was 2.58. When you look at like his whip and his hits per 9 innings and his walks, they were really high, a 1.67 whip, over 10 hits per 9 innings, over 4 walks, and was like, how does a guy have a 2.58 ERA with that slash line? And it turns out it's because he allowed 11 earned runs, or he had 11 earned runs, but he allowed 26 runs. He was credited for 15 unearned runs. So that just shows that sometimes the car may look nice, but you look under the hood and it's nothing but shit.
In other words, he doesn't belong on the Reds. He belongs on the Red Sox.
I
Right.
mean, his major league numbers aren't really that different from that season. Obviously, where the whip's not as high, but he has a 1.42 whip in 2022, 1.37 in 2023, and a 1.50 last year. And he's averaged 9 and 10 hits per inning, per 9 innings, each of those years. So he is not really he needs to be a pitch to contact guy, but with like getting ground balls, not these clear, I guess, like line drives or home runs or whatever is destroying him.
Let's move on to their superstar, Elly De La Cruz, of course. We know how flashy he is. We know how much of a highlight reel he is. There is definitely a conversation that goes around since he's been in the league. Is this guy overrated and he just is flashy, or is he really the next, big star for them? Um, we talk about players on teams that, hey, if they take a step, this team's going to be really good. And of course, for the Reds, if Elly steps up and really becomes a superstar, the Reds could be a very, very scary team. But Will, do you think he has the ability to do that? Because his numbers, like some good, some bad.
I think he has the ability. I'm going to go with the easy answer based on today's trends: strike out less and get on base more. I mean, it's not that hard, but when you strike out 218 times and you also are like the fastest human being on the planet, like you got to cut down on those strikeouts somehow and bring up that batting average. That's pretty much it. He's a big human being. He will just naturally hit for power, and he gets a ball in the gap. It feels like it's guaranteed a triple. But if he wants to be a table setter for the Reds, if he's going to be batting somewhere within the top 3 in the batting order, get a single, get a walk, steal second base. You're pretty much guaranteed a double, or 2 bases, I should say, as soon as he gets on base. So that's the main thing. If he can get his strikeout total under 200 at least, then I imagine he's going to be enough of a superstar for the Reds. Don't play defense and you'll do even better.
It's crazy. Like he has a 339 OBP, which is, I guess, whatever. But he had 67 stolen bases. Like, imagine if his OBP was even a little bit higher. He'd have like 90
Right.
stolen bases a season.
Well,
Like,
just
it's
imagine
crazy.
if he had 200 strikeouts instead of 218, and those
Yeah.
18 plate appearances, let's say a third of those were walks or singles. And so that's 6 times he's on base. And given how many times he tries to steal, there's at least 5 more times there, which puts him over
Yeah.
70 stolen bases. And he's probably going to get on base even more than those times. It's just taking that like roughly 339 on base percentage into account there. So, I mean, just little things like that could be huge.
Yeah. And little adjustments. And, what if you're going to go back to it? What does Terry bring to Ellie's game? John, what is your like overall take on Ellie? Because I think you see the highlights and he makes stuff look really good, but is there some overrated there? Again, for him, do you think he can take the next step?
I think Will hit the nail on the head there. When you look at his, I'm when you look at him as a productive player, he needs to get on base. And when you look at him overall, he needs to cut down on the damn strikeouts, because in May, his batting average, his of May of last year, his batting average was 208. His on base percentage was 298. He had 40 strikeouts. And in September, he had 44 strikeouts with a 235 batting average and an on base percentage of 306. The rest, he was below 40, well below 40, and had an Jesus, a batting average of 279 in
Pitching to
April.
himself.
Yeah, 279 in April and March, 266 in June, July 299, and August 269. His on base percentage was 385, 339, 378, and 329 in those months. The guy needs to cut down on the strikeouts. You can't be any you're not any good to anybody if you're walking back to the dugout every at bat.
Yeah.
I do find it interesting you mentioned the months thing, because that was something that um I remember last season was something I was looking at a lot with him, at least going up to the All-Star break, when it was like, all right, who's your All-Star shortstop? And his name got thrown around, and at the time I was like, you're a bunch of morons. What are you doing?
It's just a popularity
I mean,
contest.
what you said about his monthly splits are better than what I thought they were overall. The one thing I remembered was that I found odd, especially late in the season, he just completely shut down the running game, which really seemed odd to
well,
me.
I was just going to
Um,
bring that up. So you look at it, and I mean, it makes sense, right? But like, when his like so in August and September, only 6 steals in
mhm.
those months, but his OBP was the worst it was that season. I mean, he was 298
Good
in
for him.
May, which in May he had 8 stolen bases, but then the three
14.
four oh excuse me, yeah, 14. I was looking at the wrong month, but yeah,
Mhm.
328 and then 306, and I don't know. Is it because of that? Did he like shut it down more because of their stand? I don't really know, but um
If he shut it down because of their standings, that doesn't tell me that
I
he's
don't.
that doesn't help me bring the case of that he's this team's star. He seems
No,
more the opposite.
I don't think it really was that. I don't know what the case is, but this, anytime he gets on base, he's a threat, and that's what you want. Now, again, so it's just based on if you can get on base even a couple more times, how much of an impact you can have, and if he can really figure it out, like you're looking at a 5-tool player, despite the defense that needs to improve, that like is going to be really hard to stop. So. Yeah, look out for Elly if he can figure it out, man. Like he gets
Well, I
on
mean,
base, he's a difference maker.
look at the correlation with the high batting average to the caught stealing. Really, not caught stealing, to the stolen bases. In the month of July, he had a batting average of 299, whereas in the month of just let's go with August, he had a batting average of 269, and his on base percentage for July was 378. His on base percentage was 328. So that's a significant drop off there. And the stolen bases were 15 in July and then 6 in August. Something had to have happened there where either he got into his own head of I don't want to, run and my wheels fall off, or for all we know, maybe he got hurt with something and it was something minor or something like that. But he's too effective to on base to not get on base more.
Yeah, and you got to look at, of course. I mean, there's, you know, again, the scenarios that they were in or whatnot, but again, he's a difference maker, so he's just got to figure the batting side out, and he's
Hit
going to be
the
a
figure it
force.
out button, god damn it.
Last thing I want to wrap up with is kind of just an overall thing. We've kind of already touched on it a little bit, but have they done enough to put themselves into a potential playoff conversation? Or are
Harry
they
Francona. That's
still?
my answer.
That's your answer.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Will they take the next steps? And again,
It'll be
Terry
better than the
Francona-
75 win projection. That's
you know what's
all
crazy
I'll say
though?
for now.
They might have they really might have an easier chance to win the division than getting a wild card spot. Like
Yeah.
that's the
I
other
mean, I
part
will
of
say
this.
this.
I don't know about that.
Aside before looking more into the Francona's history and dealing with what he did first year with new teams, easy to write off the Reds, especially because they were talking about firing Bell because he didn't do enough. And so it was like they're going to take the step, and their next step was hardly anything player wise.
Yeah.
After looking at what Francona has done in his career and the makeup of the Reds team compared to what the Indians were back in, what was it, 2013?
Yeah.
I'm gonna think about it a lot more. I know personally this year with my predictions, when we get to that episode later in March, I'm gonna try to be a bit more bolder with some of my takes. I always feel like I end up falling back on just kind of the run of the mill sort of takes. And there's a part of me that is like, all right, Francona's kind of dealt with something like this before, makeup wise of the roster. The NL Central sucks. The only real competition, it seems like for sure, is the Cubs. There's a good chance the Brewers are going to be in that conversation too, just because of Pat Murphy and the trends of that team. But suddenly I'm like, all right, if let's say 88, 89 wins takes the division, all right, maybe there is a shot if Francona does find that secret something within each of the players and can milk out nearly a dozen or 2 dozen extra wins like he did with the Guardians in 2013.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like currently looking at the roster, and yeah, like it's very. There's a lot of similarities. Like you have like a 26-year-old Jason Kipnis, a 27-year-old Carlos Santana, like Nick Swisher's on this team, a 26-year-old Michael Brantley. It's a lot of like kind of guys, 25-year-old Jan Gomes. It's a lot of guys that are kind of like in the same category as the Reds have right now. Sorry, 20-year-old Jose Ramirez too. This season.
That's who Elly is. Elly is the Reds equivalent of Ramirez. I mean, obviously not the same player, but
And then like on the pitching side, Corey Kluber, who was 27th, Scott Cashmere, Ubaldo, Jimenez, remember him?
Mm,
well, the thing that I found
So
interesting was if you looked at the 2012, it's the Ubaldo that John's familiar with.
yeah,
You look at 2013, it's the Ubaldo the Rockies were familiar
yeah.
with.
So like,
Hmm.
yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm starting to sell myself on these Reds. I really am. God, it's gonna be so tough because I really can't go against the Brewers, and I guess there's an argument for the Cubs, but like, I don't know, man. Like, even I compare the Cubs and the Reds right now, and I'm like, I don't think it's that far off. And I like Francona a lot better than I like Frank Council too. So that's the other part of it. So I don't know. I
It's,
might.
I mean, on paper, it's going to be everyone else all the way. So
Yeah.
the one benefit that the Reds do have is because of all that depth, they have better not just matchups. They're in a better situation when injuries hit because they will hit. They'll hit every team.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely one thing where if you look at someone like, I mean, even the Cubs or the Brewers, depending on where certain injuries hit, like there's not that much depth behind them, but the Reds seem to have that depth. So that could be something where you get to like the dog days of summer, you get those nagging injuries that are messing with guys, and suddenly like maybe like Kyle Tucker on the Cubs doesn't have protection that he would have had earlier in the season because Suzuki or Bush or someone is slipping, or the Brewers don't have much behind Contreras and Hoskins offensively. And then suddenly the Cubs are doing, or not Cubs, the Reds are doing enough with their offense where they can plug and chug and their pitching is better than what was projected. And suddenly, boom, 87 wins, you win the division, popping
I'm
champagne.
telling you, I'm
Then you lose
like,
in the wild card series.
now I'm
that's a
gonna.
lot to have to go
I
right.
don't know, man. I'm kind of talking myself into
The
it.
American League, all right. So the American League Central of last year is kind of why, like, all right, there's always some secret, there's always some underdog that stands out in the baseball season. Last year it was the Tigers, but in general, that Central was
Yeah.
not what anyone expected because everyone thought the Twins were going to run away with it, and that just was not the case. It was by far the opposite. So in an NL Central where right now the narrative it seems like is the Cubs should win it hands down because the division sucks, kind of makes you think like, well, the Brewers could be the equivalent of like the Guardians, and then maybe the Reds are like the Tigers, and suddenly it's, oh well, maybe the Cubs did the big thing, but now it's not paying out the way they thought about. Maybe Shaw doesn't do well. Maybe Bush has a bad like sophomore, junior, or whatever he's on in his major league career. So there's still a whole month of spring training at play. Players might get hurt. Certain teams, Mets, a lot of stuff is happening to them. Like you just don't know what could happen between now and opening day, and even when opening day hits, what you see after the All-Star break could be vastly different than how things are played out in the front half. It's why you play 162 games.
God, I'm gonna look really dumb if they have like 68 wins, but I'm gonna have to have I'm gonna have to have a sit down and really. I don't know. I'm
I'm
selling
gonna buy
myself.
you like Elly De La Cruz and like Paul Skeens like combo jersey just
Just
so
down
you
the
can
middle.
rep. And then on the front, it's gonna have the Tigers logo, so he's gonna cover all the bases.
I will say I did predict the Tigers mix. I had them
You
winning
had them winning the
that
division and they
I
made the
know.
playoffs.
Yes, but
So
it was the win total was maybe the same. So maybe Reds, maybe. But that is all for episode 8 and day 8 of Around the League in 30 days. We head next for day 9 already to the Cleveland Guardians after their miracle season. You can follow us on Twitter at BL_breakdowns, Big League Breakdowns everywhere else. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying the content as we push along through all these teams. Like the video if you liked it, and tell all your friends if you really liked it. But that is all for us, and we will see you next time.
Wear your seatbelt.